So today on the Hope for Your Garden show, we're going to have the Estero Bay Newcomers Group. We're going to teach you a little bit about potting and how to put pots in plants and how to make some container gardens, succulent gardens, cactus gardens, and the difference between the two, and just annual, perennial. So welcome. And at the end, I will have goodie bags that were provided by Kellogg's and Garden and Bloom. So you'll all get some really sweet little goodie bags.
Oh, nice.
So the first part of, is picking your pot and finding out what size pot you're going to use. And that can come either after, if you have a plant in mind, finding the right size pot. One of the biggest things that I see in people bringing in plants that look sad, and then you start asking questions and you figure out that they have a plant that's going to get big in a little tiny plant pot because they were going to set it on their table and have it be beautiful all summer, but they get root bound. And so knowing how big your plant is going to get is a must, because there are so many different colors that go together and textures, but they get big. And so even like this one, the yarrow, is perfect to mix with, say, petunia right now. But if I put it in a pot, say this size, and I mix a bunch of other things in it, it's going to get root bound really fast. And in about 2 months, it's going to look raggedy, straggly, and horrible. So it's really knowing how big each plant gets if you're mixing them and how much room they need. Lavender is one that does need a fair amount of room, and so you see people putting them in little low bowls because they add texture and they look great in their little 4-inch pot, and then they look sad really, really fast. And so that's one of the big keys to doing really nice color bowls that they're going to last in their size pot. The other is keeping plants from getting root bound. If a plant is hungry in a pot, it will search. And the more roots it puts out searching, the faster your plant becomes root bound. So if you feed regularly, your plant won't have to search, and they stay nicer looking for a longer period of time.
That's interesting.
I didn't know that.
I didn't know
Yeah,
that.
so that's the key of really using really good potting soil will help with that, and then using a really good fertilizer. On the fertilizer end of it, I have found that using an organic mix that has the probiotics in it, all the little organisms and bacteria, they actually eat some of that soil and poop out food. So they continue to feed the plant even if you forgot. And so using the organic ones really do make a big difference. They'll also make a big difference in the health of the plant, staying vigorous and healthy, because it usually feeds the soil, which then feeds the plant, which then the plant takes up what it needs and pushes out really healthy growth, as opposed to some of the old-fashioned liquid fertilizers that are not organic. They push growth. They're just there to push growth. They don't really do anything for the roots. And once they're used up and you forget, the plant crashes. And so that's kind of key if you want to have nice pots. I find that really, really helps. The other, you can use polymers in the soil, which are the water savers. One really easy polymer is cornstarch. So if you aren't going to be around, on vacation or traveling, add a couple tablespoons of cornstarch to, say, like a tablespoon to this size pot. And you could go like even a cup to 2 cups to a wine barrel or a larger pot. And it will hold the water in, but it doesn't take it away. Some of the polymers, when they dry up, if they get really dry, they'll actually take it away from the plant. So the cornstarch is a really good, easy, cheap way to go. So that's, if you have potting soil that isn't as good and is drying out too fast, or packing, it's another one to keep it really nice.
And so if you get a lot of roots in a pot, that causes it to dry out faster, probably.
Right. And sometimes you can even get where the roots are going around in a circle and they block the inside from getting anything. And so they actually end up, the roots on the inside aren't getting enough water. The roots on the outside, because you're watering it all the time to keep it moist, are actually getting overwatered. So you'll get a little overwater, underwater look to a plant, and they usually tend to get really leggy looking when they're root bound, because there's not enough food, so they're trying to just sustain the new growth. and they'll lose their inner leaves. It's like I don't usually put rocks in the bottom for drainage, but if you want to use, if your hole's big and you're losing soil, coffee filters work wonderful as a screen, or old, if you have your screens, save those, roll them up, and then cut little squares to put in the bottom. Most of the pots nowadays are made with standard size holes that allow for good drainage, and so you usually don't need to have screens or different things. But if you want, you can use, those are good, cheap, easy. And the handy wipes, that kind of clothy material but disposable, those make really nice. You can put those on the bottom and that will actually help hold moisturizers. So
Since we're talking about holding moisture in, I planted a strawberry pot, and every time I try to water it, so much of the soil comes out of the little holes. What could I do for that?
that you would actually plant, when you plant it, start at the bottom and move your way up as you plant your holes there. If you plant a little bit lower in the pot where you're doing those holes, it won't overfill.
But then you keep coming up with the soil because there's another little set of them at the top.
Right. You could probably put screen behind that, each of those little spots, or like a handy wipe just to keep the soil from going in.
I'll try that the next time.
Yeah, or even a coffee filter would probably work, and it'll hold, a little bit of that from washing down. The soil is hugely important. That over the years of gardening has become the it factor of what's going to make my plant do really well, and it's good soil, good healthy soil. So organic soil. I don't usually recommend that people use peat moss or like the peat moss perlite mixes, because there's no food value in peat moss. It's completely nil of food value, and so what happens is it absorbs some of the food if you do feed, and then has to release it back out. The other is that it's usually really high in oxygen, and so when a plant goes into it puts out all these roots because it's getting lots of air but searching for food, and then you end up getting really root-bound plants. And that you can see sometimes if you plant plugs that have been done in a perlite mix, or a peat moss, perlite, just peat moss and perlite. There's so much oxygen in there that if you move it to either clay or sand soil that isn't as rich, then when you put it in, the little roots start to go out, and they go, well, there's not enough air over here, so I'll go back in. And then when you dig up like annuals, you'll dig up and they'll just be these little squares.
I've seen that,
And so that using really good soil, something that has food value. Most of the potting soils nowadays have a certain amount of chicken manure that's actually used. They actually soak the fir bark in the chicken manure so it absorbs, and then they mix it with usually kelp meal, earthworm castings, a little bit of phosphorus. So they all have really nice rich mixes out there. Garden and Bloom is one of them. The indoor pots, I would probably go Garden and Bloom or even the Fox Farm. And those are how you get that Disneyland look, is to use really good, yes. How do they get those, gorgeous pots? Well, it's feeding regularly and having really good potting soil. It's, yeah. And if any of you live in Los Osos, okay, the one thing that's you don't want to do at all, legal, is use our Los Osos sand in your pots.
Yeah, it gets like...
Right, it's super fine. It's actually smaller than a water molecule. And so when you mix that sand, it packs really, really tight, locks out oxygen, and the plants suffer. Not horticulture sand. So when they're talking about sand, they're talking about a coarser grain, usually like a 16-bit horticulture sand or something coarser like pumice or perlite even. And that is the reason that water rolls off our soil out here. So mixing in humus and making something better out of it. But I was talking one time to a masonry guy, and he had brought his pot in and pull it out, and there's the sand. He said, I should have guessed that if we can't use it to make concrete for the very same reason, that you shouldn't be using it in your pots.
Makes sense.
So yeah, it's I wish we had really nice sand. Los Osos would look so different.
Aren't more certain plants more adaptable. I mean, if you plant them right to begin with, they're more adaptable to our sand than many other plants. So you kind of have to choose.
Yeah, it's hard because I mean, even our native plants do better with some fertilizer or something in there. A lot of the native things were growing underneath oaks, or where they were actually getting better soils, or where plants before had dropped off. Sand verbena and different. There are some things that do like it, but it doesn't. I think for most plants, they don't do well in it. It's, I've yet to see just, wow, we planted it straight in that and they did great. Because usually plants are going from that of having a nice mix in their pot that they're sold in, and even as little ones, and when you put them into that sand, they hit the no oxygen wall and kind of, I'll just stay here and try and survive as opposed to grow.
So how big a hole should you, per the size of what you're planting, should you fill with the better soil? I mean, like 4 times as much?
Usually, rule of thumb is twice the size of your root ball is what, and then you would backfill. And I usually out here recommend that you just backfill with good soil, and you don't have to mix it up. It will kind of leach out into it as the roots get out and get fuller. One of the things that's now in the potting soils and the fertilizers are the probiotics and the mycorrhiza, which is a little fungus that attaches to the roots almost like a nematode and allows your plants to do better. And so that made incredible difference in planting and having plants take up nutrients and be able to assimilate nitrogen just from the air and overall health of the plant. So that usually you see that now in your potting soils and in your fertilizers. And it's what the farmers had inoculated their fields with and their beans and different things. So it's available to the public, and it's amazing to see the results of with and without. So everything I plant pretty much gets mycorrhiza in some form. Yeah, the cheaper soils, you can find good cheap soils. It's looking at the ingredients and knowing what the ingredients are. And that I think is key. And we actually have some literature inside that I can show you on what you would be looking for. Then it's textures and colors and opposite colors. So you have your monochromatic, you have your color wheel, which I forgot, but in the color wheel, picking opposite colors tend to make things pop and look really colorful. It's kind of easy to do. I mean, red is opposite of green, so it does make the colors pop when you see them. I had one here that I wanted to show. The orange, reddish colors on certain plants will pop. Like this one has the orange and the yellow and the red, and it's amazing to see that if you put it in the green pot or an orange pot, that it makes it just stunning. If I put it in a muted yellow or terracotta, not so much. It almost kind of becomes dull and brown. And so those are kind of fun, playing with your colors and textures on different things. This one, and it's funny, I'll go through, a lot of the companies will come around with sample trucks. And so they have all these different things. And the ones that I find that sell the most are the companies who the people loading their cars know how to artistically load so that you end up wanting one of those, and then you get them and you go, well, that doesn't look the same as it did because you forgot that one key plant. And so it's amazing going through and seeing how things can set off. That plant I have planted on the other side in an orange pot with lobelia around it, and it's just
that would really pop.
It's the opposite orange-blue colors. And this one is a little sedum, and same. Where did I do with the orange pot? Did I get it over here? Like that one will be really pretty, and then this I could even use the other little sedum or that red. And this one, when I saw these two, this is what I was planning on putting together.
Yeah, that's so gorgeous plant.
With this, and this one.
Oh, that's really good.
And so it's like, ooh. And then we could even add like one of the Carrick's rooster tails to that. This one is another really good example of that red and purple and how it makes that one glow. And if I put it in this pot, not so much, it almost looks sick. So really fun to see all the different textures. This one, when I saw these, my first thought was it looked like something that belonged in the coral reef. And so I haven't found the plant that I'm going to put in here yet with it, and I may not even put anything else in with it, but it was something either using this or using it in a plain pot and using other plants that look like they belong to the coral reef. Other succulents, aloes are really good for that. The other item is knowing your cactus and succulents, very different in the way that they, even though they're grouped kind of in a clump together, the cactus really need to be dry and need to have this like cactus mixed soil. They need to dry out. They usually take full sun, all day sun, and the succulents can actually take shade. They like more water and they like better soil. They like it richer. Cactus will actually split if they get too much food, whereas succulents will just grow with that. So even though they're drought tolerant, they require two different things. So you're almost better doing a cactus garden or a succulent garden and keeping them separate, because their water, usually the succulents won't look as good as your cactus. One other point was drought tolerant plants. Drought tolerant plants are usually plants that have really good searchers for roots, and they don't, in a pot, when they can't get water, they tend to die faster because there's no water, and they just go, well, there's nothing here for us. Let's go. And so, yeah, that's it. There's nothing.
I'm on the road.
And so drought tolerant plants aren't always drought tolerant in containers. One example is the tea tree. In the ground, you could go winter rains, you could completely leave it alone. We could have drought years and they would be fine. If you put it in a pot and you forget to water, they'll be dead like that. And they don't come back. They have like a real, if you don't catch it when it wilts, they just up. We actually have the tea trees right next to our hose area because they tend to get root bound faster. They tend to need water faster, and they tend to be the ones that need the most water. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot, even the protea are like that. They can go months and months without water, but when they're in the pots, they need regular watering. Mm-hmm. So that's, a lot of people put proteas in pots and they go, well, they died. And they think, it's something else. It's actually that they weren't getting enough water. So that drought tolerant in pots is a hard one. I always worry about people who go, well, I'm going to be gone for months. I want a drought tolerant plant to put in my pot. It's like, you should do it when you get back, or find a friend. Yeah, find a friend, because they're not, yeah. That's so that one I wanted to touch upon. And then the shade plants, knowing that your plants need shade, and that if you're grouping things together, that they are going to need either the same requirements. A lot of times you see plants and one isn't doing well, that's because it's a sun plant. You have the rest of them in the shade, and all the shade ones are doing fine, but the sun ones aren't. So knowing your sun, your shade, where you're going to put your pot, and then going from there. One of the really neat ones, this one will actually grow in sun or shade. It will grow beautifully, but the flowers won't open in the shade.
Right.
And so then you just get texture of leaf and leaf color. But I've seen a lot of people, why aren't my flowers opening? Well, because they're in too much shade. So there are these, and the arctosis is another one that is drought tolerant, but it does need regular water in pots or they get leggy looking. And that the flower won't open if they're in the shade. So that kind of defeats the purpose on those. And then I guess I will go ahead and pick a pot and show you guys a little bit about planting. I think now I have to pick. That's one of the hardest ones. Okay. So this is Garden and Bloom potting soil.
Now, do you have something in the bottom of the pot?
I don't.
For drainage? Oh,
I don't. This potting soil is formulated to give you ample drainage, and the size hole in the bottom was about 3/4 inch, which is enough to give the plot drainage. They're also not glazed on the inside, so the pot will wick away some of the water. Ceramic pots are going to wick away more water. Unglazed ceramic are going to wick away more water than your glazed pots and your plastic pots. So they do have a water holding factor that's really nice. So one of the key things is going to be giving your pot room for water and not planting it all the way to here. Because when you add the water, it'll just run off and it won't stay inside. And I think I might actually do I'm tempted to do a succulent. Okay, now see, this is where we have to decide.
Oh, yeah, I like that.
I think we're going to do a succulent. So one of the key things is having spill, thrill, and fill, or filler, thriller, and spiller. And that would be your thriller is that one in the main plant that you go, wow. And then you have your filler, things to fill in, which tend to be texture, a little bit of color, and then you have your spiller, which hang over and can be anything, bacopa, lobelia, anything that would trail. I mean, there's so many different varieties and plants out there. I think that becomes one of my ooh, that one. No, that one. That one over there. We started to carry Annie's Annuals. Oh, yeah. And if any of you have been online or have gone there, it's phenomenal. You walk around going, oh, wow, oh. And I'd hear other people in the aisles doing the same thing. Oh, wow.
What are Annie's Annuals for those of us who don't know?
Annie's Annuals is a company in Richmond, California, and they carry all 4-inch plants. Everything is grown in 4-inch. She tends to carry rare and unusual plants, from the very rare to the very unusual. Things that after doing this for 30 years that I've never seen before and going, wow. I can show you some of the things that we brought back from Annie's. That salvias, they have, I think it was something like 40 different kinds of salvias. And some that are just like, oh, wow, okay. Whoa. But just really unique. There's the Echium, the Pride of Madeira that you see all over with the blue spikes. I think they had 6 different kinds. From red ones to pink ones to little blue ground cover varieties.
I didn't know there was a pink one. I didn't know there was a red one.
Yeah. This particular sedum is sedum campfire. It will turn more green, almost all green in the shade. So if it's in the sun, it will turn all red. If it's in partial, it will stay red and green. People buy them and then come back and go, well, this one isn't a red one. Well, it was in the shade. They just have to move it out to the sun. I'm going to put this one with it. This is the Fire and Ice. And so with this, I'm going to actually tip it a little bit. And so you can remember if you're looking, if you're looking at the angle of the pot, that it's going to be looked at, tipping it out a little bit so that it makes, rather than where you would see it more this way, rather than having it be straight up and down, you miss a little bit. Some, you could add, they make all kinds of little figurines. You could keep it simple. I have a little bird. So when you make cuttings on your succulents, for a lot of the sedums and things, it's just cutting them off, and then the main important part of having them do well is to let this dry. Let them sit them in a box, sit them on the ground, let them dry for 3 or 4 days, and then you plant them. This actually, when this scabs over, it creates a hormone that tells the plant to set roots. And so if you don't do that, I always give the analogy that it's like if you scratched your arm and stuck it in the soil, chances are you're going to get an infection. If you scratch your arm, wait a day, and then stick it to the soil, you're going to be fine. You brush it off and you're all good. And so it's the same way with the plant. When this isn't healed yet, it tends to rot. But taking little cuttings like this and then popping them in If you feed succulent bowls regularly, they don't get root bound. They won't get that leggy look. You can also, with the sedums, you can go back and top dress them, and they stay really, really nice. So that's another way.
What was that term you just used? Top dress them?
Top dress them.
Is that kind of like deadheading on roses?
It would just be going and adding a little fresh new soil.
Oh,
Beautiful. So this one, the more sun it's in, the more yellow it turns. Gets that really chartreuse color. So really fun to have the red, the green, the gray. And I'm going to plant that one first. And so these are all actually sedums. This company that we get these from, they actually mix different little succulents so people can do little gardens and just divide them up. A lot of the sedums work really well because they root as they go. And
What's the difference in a sedum and a succulent? Because to me, they kind of behave the same.
Well, sedum is a succulent.
It is a succulent.
It is a succulent.
Okay.
Sedum is the genus.
Okay.
So but the succulent family is huge.
Yeah. Okay.
I couldn't even tell you how many, but it's probably in the millions. If it doesn't have thorns, it's a succulent. It's, they're all that, they hold a lot of water. They're, very porous. Ice plants, aeoniums, the echeverias, grappapetalums, another variety of echeveria. So, this is an echeveria. The aeoniums, there's huge family of those. All the flat leaf, the big leaf, small leaf. So many different varieties.
I heard there were like 50 varieties of hens and chicks.
Yeah, that's an echeveria. That's actually related to this. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, definitely. And it's a hard one when people come in and they say, I want a hen and chicks. And which one would you like? Thriller is not high. It still will be a thriller. This is my thriller. This could be your thriller. That's the other. Holes are a must. You have to have pots that have holes drilled on the bottom. Ceramic drill bits work really, really well. If any of you don't have holes, we can probably take it over to the house and drill it, because that is the key. So many times I see them and they're just rotting, because even if you don't water, there's going to be a backup on the bottom, and the other is that they won't get oxygen, and so then they end up suffocating. And like driftwood on this.
I love that.
And then because I don't want it quite as plain, so you can, I'm doing that little kind of fake river. My little sandy beach.
that makes sense.
So the little, with the blue and the green. And then, and you could even, put a little driftwood in there or whatever. But the garden art is really kind of fun. So, ta-da! Yeah.
Very pretty.
Oh, you're welcome.
So come on, join us. You will enjoy it. You'll stay informed when you are gardening with hope. Hope for your garden, fruits and veggies, a natural treat. Hope for your garden, blossoms, blooming, soil sweet. So come on, join us. You will enjoy it. You'll stay informed when you are gardening with hope. Hope for your garden, fruits and veggies,